I'm going to show you how you can write an abstract quickly and easily. I'm in the middle of doing an MBA in Trinity College in Dublin. And over the past few weeks, I've been working on a research paper. And our tutor asked us to write an abstract that summarizes the research paper. Abstracts can be a little bit tricky, which is why I suggest you ask yourself 4 questions about your research paper before you write your abstract. And don't worry, I'll break down how to write an abstract later on in this tutorial. So first up, consider your research paper. What problem are you studying as part of your paper? So as an example, I'm writing a paper at the moment about how content publishers like me can change business models. Basically, for years, I got a lot of traffic to my content sites from SEO. Thanks to AI and changes to search, I've lost a lot of that traffic. So I want to figure out how content publishers like me can find a new business model and continue to earn a good living online. Next up, you're going to consider, how did you study the problem in question? Did you interview people? Did you look at research papers? Did you read books? Or perhaps you studied frameworks from other niches, or industries? I did a few of those things for my research paper and I referenced them in the abstract. Next up, what did you find out? So when you're writing your research paper, chances are you came across some key findings or interesting statistics or insights from your interviews, or perhaps you came across some frameworks in books that you think are particularly relevant and that can help you solve the problem in question. You want to try and summarize these findings in your paper and refer to them in the abstract. Finally, ask yourself, why does all of this matter? After all, you're not just writing a research paper for you, and you're not just writing an abstract for you either. All of this should be relevant to external readers and also people who aren't that familiar with the topic or with the problem in question. In other words, they should be able to take something applicable from your research and use it for their own work or their own research. So once you've asked and answered these questions, it's time to write your abstract. Now, a good abstract is usually 300 words long, give or take 10%, but don't obsess too much about the word count. It's actually more helpful if you break your abstract down into 7 different parts, and then you can tick them off one by one. So the first part, unsurprisingly, is the title for your abstract or research paper. And I'd actually recommend that you write this last because it's something that you're going to ideate or iterate. Next up, your abstract should have some context or some background to the problem so that readers of the abstract can understand at a glance what the research paper is about. There should be a clear problem statement that demonstrates what exactly the issue is and how your research paper is going to address it. You should have a purpose or objective stated in your abstract. In other words, how exactly are you going to solve that problem through your research? Speaking of research, what methods are you going to use? In your abstract, state if you're going to do interviews, if you're going to use a particular type of model, which is what I did for my research paper, and I'll show you an example in a few moments. If you're going to use qualitative data or quantitative data or some other type of research process. You also want to briefly summarize your key findings. And don't worry if you're not quite clear what your key findings are. You can write a sentence or two about what you think the key findings will be or their implications. And finally, the abstract should explain in a sentence or two how this contributes to the wider field and also to the work of other researchers and people in your industry. In other words, your abstract needs to make it clear why this research paper is relevant, and this will mean people are more likely to take it off the shelf or to download it and read the rest of your research paper. Now let's go over to my actual abstract that I submitted as part of my MBA, and I'll show you what these individual parts of the abstract look like. So here is the abstract that I submitted as part of my MBA. So if I head over to word count, you can see it's 305 words long. Now, I actually spent about a couple of hours writing this particular abstract and I had to get it down from 600 words to 300 words. It's actually harder to say something with a tight word count. So the first part is, of course, the title. I wrote 5 or 6 versions of this title before I came up with one that I was happy with. And I did all of this after I'd written the rest of the abstract and had an idea of what was in the research paper. Next up is the problem statement, and you put the problem statement at the top. So in this case, I wrote a problem statement all about how content publishers like me could build a profitable business by publishing informational articles, how they could get millions of page views from Google, and earn money from ad revenue. But then in late 2023, Google changed its search algo and ChatGPT arrived and websites started to lose traffic. So this meant less traffic and less money for publishers like me. Now, I could have probably condensed this problem statement a little bit further. I probably strayed a little bit into the background or context, but it did kind of summarize the issue that I'm going to address with this research paper. And that brings me to the second part of the abstract, which is the purpose and objective. And you'll notice that I don't actually have subheadings for each of these sections. I just provided those earlier on to help you break down your abstract into specific parts that you can write one by one. So the purpose or objective of my research paper is to understand how publishers can continue to grow their business, even if they're getting less reach in Google search or on social media. And how can they do all of this in the age of AI? So in my paper, I'm going to evaluate how I'm transforming from SEO and organic search to a newsletter first model. And actually elsewhere on the channel, I have lots of videos explaining how I'm growing my newsletter first business. And the goal, of course, of this research paper is to articulate that strategy. Next up is the research methodology that I'm going to use for this research paper. And in this research paper, I'm going to use something called value chain analysis to figure out how I can unlock more value for customers and clients, and also for me as a business owner. I'm also going to use something called the Ansoff matrix. And the Ansoff matrix is another type of business analysis framework that will help me figure out key strategies for growing my business post AI and post SEO. Now, you just simply swap these out for whatever research methods that you're going to use as part of your research paper. So that could be interviews, it could be qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, it could be research, or some other way that you're approaching the problem in question. The next part of the abstract summarizes the key findings. Now, I don't need to know exactly what these key findings are. After all, I haven't finished writing the research paper. However, I should have an idea of what the key findings will be. And because I've been working on this problem for quite a while, my intuition says that a newsletter first model is much more resilient than relying on SEO or relying on social media algos. What I need to do in the research paper is actually have some data and some research that backs this up. And I can, of course, change these key findings later on, but I need to articulate this in the abstract. And the final part of this abstract is a single sentence that explains why this paper is relevant for small publishers and also relevant for anybody who's interested in what's happening with search and what's happening with AI. Now, like I said, it took me a few hours to write this abstract. The challenges were whittling it down from 600 to 300 words and making sure that I covered each one of these sections. And I'd recommend that you break your abstract down just like that, because some sections can take longer than other sections. In terms of style, you typically write your abstract in the present tense, and you would use the third rather than the first person. You would also use formal academic language. Now, I probably could have cited a couple of sources here and included those citations as well, but I submitted this abstract and it was approved by my tutor, which means I can go ahead and finish writing the research paper. You can see it's pretty easy to write an abstract once you know what the key parts are. Now, you'll notice that I didn't reference going into ChatGPT and asking it to write an abstract for you. That's because ChatGPT will come up with something bland and generic, and it doesn't exactly know the problem in question. But you can, of course, use ChatGPT to ideate. So if it understands a little bit about you or your business or the problem you're trying to solve, you can ask it to come up with some ideas for your research paper. But I'd still recommend that you actually write the abstract yourself. That's because you have to write the research paper yourself as well. And if ChatGPT writes it for you, then your abstract may not be relevant to the research paper in question. Plus, if you're doing this for academia, you could actually be in breach of their guidelines about ethical use of AI. So that is something to bear in mind. Now, this video comprises an entire playlist where I'm documenting some of the frameworks that I'm learning as part of my MBA journey. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to follow along. And also, if you want to join my daily newsletter and get access to some proven MBA frameworks, head over to briancollins.com and I'll put a link in the comment section below this video.